You don't remember that?
No, sir. My priority is protecting the American public, not getting into the weeds of polygraphs.
And to have a decent memory when you come before a committee.
I'm happy to talk about all the good work the men and women of the FBI are doing, including provided the lowest crime rate in American history. If you want to talk about how to protect the citizens, Chicago has seen a 30% reduction in its murder rate because of the men and women of the FBI.
You take credit for that?
I'll happily do that.
You
The
take
interagency partners and the men and women of the Chicago PD have never been more
include
powerful.
local law enforcement, please.
You won't believe how this conversation actually went down. 3 hours into the hearing, Senator Dick Durbin shifted his questioning to the Epstein files.
Director Patel, to your knowledge, did a whistleblower ever make a disclosure to Attorney General Bondi indicating that the New York field office was withholding Epstein-related records?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
You know that there was such a whistleblower?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
In response to the blowback she received, Attorney General Bondi also pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memorandum stating there is no incriminating client list. Why was this July 7th memorandum unsigned?
Would you prefer I've used AutoPen?
The exchange that followed centered on a specific aspect of the FBI's handling of those records, particularly the process that led to a July memorandum and questions about what names might have been flagged or redacted during the review. Director Patel, Durbin, began. To your knowledge, did a whistleblower ever make a disclosure to Attorney General Bondi indicating that the New York field office was withholding Epstein-related records? I'm not familiar with that whistleblower, Patel responded. Are you aware that there was such a whistleblower? Durbin pressed. I'm not familiar with that whistleblower, Patel repeated. The answer was brief, definitive. Durbin moved forward without pausing to challenge it. He had other ground to cover. In response to the blowback she received, Durbin continued. Attorney General Bondi also pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March. Patel listened without interrupting. And the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump, Durbin said. That detail, the directive to flag documents mentioning a specific name, became the focal point of what followed. Durbin wasn't asking about the review in general terms. He was asking about what happened to references to particular individuals during that process. Nothing came of that review until July, Durbin said, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memorandum stating there is no incriminating client list. The phrase unsigned memorandum carried weight in the question. Official documents from federal agencies typically bear signatures, establishing accountability for their contents and conclusions. This one did not. Why was this July 7th memorandum unsigned? Durbin asked directly. Patel's response came quickly. Would you prefer I've used AutoPen? The comment suggested Patel viewed the question as technical rather than substantive. Durbin did not acknowledge the remark. Why was that? He asked again, returning to the core question about the absence of a signature. Patel provided a fuller answer this time. I'm sorry. The memorandum had the insignia of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and in our effort to secure transparency for the American people, because the 3 prior administrations had not done so, we conducted an exhaustive search of everything related to the Epstein cases, and we produced what was legally and permissively able to be produced to Congress and the American public. The answer addressed the scope and intent of the review, but did not explain why no individual signed the July memorandum. Durbin continued, did you personally direct that investigation so that you would sign such a document? The question asked whether Patel had been the directing authority behind the review and whether he bore responsibility for the memorandum's contents. Did I personally direct what investigation? Patel asked. Durbin clarified. Of the Epstein records for any reference to President Trump, this is exactly where things start getting really strange. The question now specified what Durbin wanted to know. Not whether Patel directed a general review of Epstein materials, but whether he directed the specific aspect of that review that involved searching for and flagging references to President Trump. Again, you are citing reporting that I think is baseless, Patel said. We conducted an investigation of the Epstein case files pursuant to the direction of the President of the administration to provide all credible information, and we are working with Congress pursuant to a congressional subpoena to turn over all the documents we can. Patel's answer referenced the President's direction and congressional cooperation, but did not address whether he personally directed the search for Trump's name or whether he was responsible for the unsigned memorandum. All individuals who at DOJ and FBI were responsible for its drafting and conclusions, Durbin said, not as a question, but as a request for information. Many individuals at the Department of Justice and the FBI are responsible, Patel answered. Was there no lead? Durbin asked. No lead person? This is the moment where the tension in the room probably skyrocketed. The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice, and I lead the FBI, Patel said. So the Attorney General is responsible for that? Durbin asked, seeking to clarify whether Bondi bore the accountability for the memorandum. The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice, Patel repeated. The exchange revealed the structure of responsibility as Patel described it. Leadership at the highest levels, but no single individual identified as having signed or taken direct responsibility for the specific conclusions in the July memorandum. Did you catch that? A massive investigation, but nobody wants to take the credit. Here is why that is so suspicious. The discussion of flagging Trump's name raised questions about the review's focus. In a case involving potential criminal activity by multiple individuals, the decision to specifically flag one person's name suggested that person's potential involvement or mention was a priority consideration during the review process. Whether that flagging was meant to ensure full disclosure, to assess potential concerns, or to manage information in some way was not stated in the exchange. The unsigned nature of the memorandum also drew attention. Federal documents typically include signatures to establish who reviewed the material, reached the conclusions, and took responsibility for the statements made. The July memorandum's lack of signature meant no single official's name was directly attached to the conclusion that there was no incriminating client list. Durbin did not explicitly state what he believed these facts demonstrated. He asked questions, established what had occurred according to the available information, and documented Patel's responses. The exchange lasted several minutes, with Durbin methodically working through each element: the whistleblower, the review directive, the flagging instruction, the unsigned memorandum, and the question of accountability. Patel's responses followed a pattern. When asked about the whistleblower, he stated he was not familiar with them. When asked about his personal direction of the Trump name review, he described the broader review process and its transparency goals without confirming or denying his specific role. When asked who was responsible for the memorandum, he distributed responsibility across multiple officials and up to agency leadership, rather than identifying specific individuals. The hearing record now contained Durbin's questions and Patel's answers on these points. The exchange did not resolve whether names were redacted from Epstein records beyond what legal requirements mandated. It did not establish definitively who made the decision to flag Trump's name during the review. It did not identify who wrote the unsigned memorandum or why no signature appeared on it. What the exchange did establish was that these questions had been asked in a public hearing, that Durbin had laid out the sequence of events as he understood them, and that Patel had provided answers that addressed some aspects while leaving other details unspecified. The Epstein case has involved multiple investigations over many years, with various decisions made about what to investigate, what to charge, and what information to release publicly. The 2006 prosecution resulted in a non-prosecution agreement that limited the scope of what could be pursued in future cases. That agreement, along with court protective orders, has been cited as restricting what information can be released without court approval. Patel referenced these restrictions during the hearing, noting that multiple court orders limit what can be disclosed. He stated, the FBI and DOJ had worked to release everything legally permissible and had gone back to judges to request lifting of protective orders, with those requests being declined. The July memorandum's conclusion that there is no incriminating client list appeared to address public speculation about the existence of a comprehensive list of individuals who were clients or associates of Epstein's criminal enterprise. Whether such a list ever existed, what it might have contained, and what became of it during various investigations has been the subject of ongoing questions. Durbin's focus on the flagging of Trump's name and the unsigned nature of the memorandum suggested concern about whether the review process was conducted with appropriate independence and whether conclusions were reached based solely on the evidence contained in the records. The questions implied interest in whether political considerations played any role in how the review was conducted or how its findings were presented. Patel's answers emphasized transparency efforts, legal restrictions on disclosure, and the involvement of career prosecutors and agents in making determinations about the records. He did not provide details about his personal involvement in directing specific aspects of the review or explain the decision-making process that led to the memorandum being unsigned. The exchange formed part of a larger hearing that covered multiple aspects of FBI operations and oversight. This particular segment, lasting several minutes, focused specifically on the Epstein records review process and the handling of information within those records. It became part of the hearing record, documenting the questions asked by the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the responses provided by the FBI director. To be honest, I'd like to read your thoughts on this. Leave your comments below and hit that subscribe button.